I'm Beth Sewald, President and CEO of the Vegas Chamber. And this week, the Vegas Chamber, we wish we were at our normal Washington, D.C. fly-in in Washington, D.C., but we're excited that we have the technology to give us the ability to do a virtual Washington, D.C. fly-in. And so I'm really honored today to have with us Congressman Mark Amodei, who represents Nevada's 2nd Congressional District. Congressman Amodei, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for the invite, Mary Beth. Good to see you.
Well, thank you. Likewise, good to see you too. You know, there's a lot of buzz right now about a potential 4th federal relief package. Can you tell us a little bit about what you would like to see in that bill to further help Nevada businesses?
Well, actually, we've got a bill that was just introduced a couple days ago by a group that I'm a member of that's called the Problem Solvers Caucus. That's a bipartisan group that's been working through this downtime to come up with something that is policy focused as opposed to winners and losers or seeking political advantage, which obviously everybody's trying to do these days in advance of a presidential election. And so we're pretty happy with that bill in terms of what we've learned from the first CARES packages that were out there as a next step, probably not the last step. The White House supports it. In order for this bill to get out of our group, you have to have 75% support from both sides. It's a group of about 40 people here in the House, and it's got members in the Senate too. So it's like, well, here you go. So we'll see if basically doing some homework, trying to learn from what we've done that's worked in the past 6 months and put it forward into the next step is valuable, or whether we're just going to let people consider or continue to sit here in vapor lock until we see what happens on November 3rd, which quite frankly, I think is incredibly irresponsible if you're supposedly trying to serve the public.
Well, and you mentioned vapor lock, and that's exactly where a lot of our members are, and it's hard for them. So are you aware of any specifics that we might see in phase 4?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all the stuff in terms of, we're talking about more unemployment assistance, but it's targeted more towards the region, Mary Beth. So we kind of avoid that thing where it was more profitable for you to be on unemployment than it was for you to be at work with your job before all this happens. There's another round of PPP available for those folks who took part in the first round of that to kind of get you through. And I mean, I wasn't trying to be flip, but I mean, it's one of those things where nobody that listens to this, it is an absolute undeniable fact that we are in this lull right now where it's like the needs continue, but that the way to address those, at least from a rescue point, has stopped. And quite frankly, the rescue mission wasn't over in the first 6 months. So when you talk about what we do in terms of how we support medical providers, there's more of that in there. It tries to be smarter in terms of what your unemployment stuff is. It continues the PPP program, which isn't the answer to everything, but quite frankly, it was an important part of it. It continues assistance to the states in terms of what they need to try to stabilize the basic services that they provide. I know that there's some argument over, well, it's not, you know, to make up for lost revenues. And quite frankly, that's an accurate description. It's not to say you can do whatever you want to your tax base and we'll just make up the difference. It's like, hey, you have to multitask and do the best you can for your tax base within the realm of medical responsibility. But I mean, come on, the idea is we're not trying to transition into the federal government will print money and just send it to people. We got to get back to where you've got good, strong private sector that's supporting all the things you do in that, as well as the tax base that it supports government as well.
Yeah, and you know, a good, strong private sector is where the Vegas Chamber has really been able to step up and step in and to help those guys. You know, in addition to that, travel and tourism industry, of course, has been one of the hardest hit, especially here in Nevada. I know you're part of the Travel and Tourism Caucus. Is there any legislation that is being considered right now that could help revitalize the travel and tourism industry?
Well, there's some for portions of it in terms of the airline industry obviously is vital. even beyond travel and tourism. And there's times when, like everybody, I'm a little mad at the airlines, depending on where I was sitting or what the heck happened. But quite frankly, they've almost achieved public utility status, even though they're not, to where it's like, if you want things to get never back to what they were, but they're a very important part of how business and industry and government all function. So it's, I don't want to use that phrase that nobody thinks is a good one, too big to fail. They're not too big to fail, but quite frankly, we need them around to make things work the way they do for more than just travel and tourism. But as we all know, we're on the road back. We're not a long ways down there yet. And I mean, Southern Nevada has been hit as hard as anybody for the obvious reasons. But nonetheless, I think it's like, okay, I think we've reached the bottom of that swing. And now it's like, how do we build back stronger and bring that back stronger? So in terms of ways to basically help for employees, help for all those things that maybe, I mean, something as simple as childcare, Mary Beth, where there's childcare provisions, because quite frankly, if mom or dad are working and they're not there for childcare, then that's something that we need as part of the infrastructure for all industries, as well as the travel and tourism industry to function. So, mass transit, all those sorts of things are things that quite frankly have a piece in this, and in getting us back, so that next year at this time, maybe you guys are back here doing your thing like you used to do before 2020.
Well, that would be great. That's what we're gonna shoot for. You mentioned infrastructure. You know that the Vegas Chamber has been really engaged in I-11 to Phoenix, between Vegas and Phoenix, and it's one of our top priorities. And I know that you sit on the Appropriations Committee. So do you think that we'll potentially get an infrastructure package through the next year that might fund some of these projects that we need here?
Yeah, I do. And I think Nevada's in pretty good shape, because you've got Dina Titus sitting on transportation and infrastructure, who is becoming one of the more senior members. And so that's a good spot for her, as well as us in appropriations. So it gives you like a 1-2 punch there. And quite frankly, Dina and I were colleagues in the Nevada legislature for years. Didn't agree on everything, but it's funny what DC does to some people and to others. And quite frankly, she's been a pleasure to work with on those issues. So infrastructure is part of that stuff going forward. But I also want to say that I think with those two committees covered, we should be in good shape. And by the way, there's no regionalism on that. The delegation's all in for getting you guys hooked up to Phoenix via I-11.
Well, and then another thing, switching gears just a little bit, also that the Vegas Chamber has been very involved in helping with past statewide legislation for limited liability. And, we want to work with the businesses that are the good actors, and they're trying to protect their employees, and they're trying to protect their patrons. And so we're not trying to protect the bad actors by any stretch of the imagination. But to that end, what are your views on limited liability legislation, and do you think anything will get passed on the federal level?
Well, I think something will get passed. I doubt that it'll get passed this year, just because I think the election's screwing all that up. But I want to tell you something where I think the Vegas Chamber can play a very important role. And that is with so much of the federal delegation being headquartered in Clark County, you can give your guys some cover by saying, we need this, and here's what we need, and quite frankly, we'll support you for that. And you've done a good job of describing it. I won't try to redo it. It's like nobody wants bad actors or bad people that are doing stuff they know is wrong to escape responsibility. But that's the minority, not the majority. And so to paint the majority with that brush, quite frankly, hurts, the vast majority of folks, you name the industry, in terms of having to basically budget for risk management and those sorts of things that go on with it. And so that doesn't mean that you escape responsibility for mistakes. Obviously, I am, for all those people that love stereotypes, obviously it's like, listen, you set the standard somewhere that makes some sense. For liability comes with gross negligence, with known disregard. I mean, blah, blah, blah. I won't try to play lawyer with you here, because that won't be pretty. But it's like, listen, we need protection for the vast majority of those service providers and product providers that are doing a good thing. And so that's one of the pieces of getting this back in. The Vegas Chamber can play a pivotal role by going to your folks and saying, hey, this is a good thing for all of us. You don't need to break faith with some of your core groups if you do something that's reasonable, but let's not turn it over to the point where we've created a cottage industry where there wasn't one before.
Well, I definitely agree with you, and I think I appreciate your advice because we'll definitely take it. One last question. I've heard a rumor about you.
It's probably true, but go ahead.
Well, I don't know. Be careful. I heard a rumor from some of my friends in the north, in northern Nevada, that you might be considering a run for governor.
Well, you know what? That's as a guy who's been doing this for probably too long, it's always a little bit flattering. Although you'd have to ask who the sources are. Maybe it's not flattering. But quite frankly, fair question, Mary Beth. But right now, as we sit here, 30 days from the start of early voting, I'm in a race which, quite frankly, if there's anything beyond this, you need to win this race first. And so we're completely focused on that. And quite frankly, I was a guy who said, when I got done with this, I'd kind of like to go home and join that "the older I get, the better I was" club. Mm-hmm. But also in this business, you don't know what things are going to look like 12 months from now and that sort of stuff. So I'll just tell you this. We're really focused on trying to be elected for a 6th time to represent Nevada's original congressional district. And then if there are discussions that that are worthwhile, then that's fine. We'll have those discussions and see where they lead. But I also think that there's other people. I got to tell you somebody, since we're talking about rumors, I'm going to go ahead and start one on your show. I'll tell you a person who I have a ton of respect for, and that's Marilyn Kirkpatrick. And Republicans aren't supposed to respect Democrats or whatever, and we don't agree on everything, but I respect the heck out of her. And so quite frankly, there's a rumor to start with, and I think I've answered your question. So there you go. The whole place will be on fire now, right?
Yes, I'm sure it will. And I'll be seeing Madam Chair tomorrow, Kirkpatrick, and I'll be sure and let her know that you started that rumor right here at the Vegas Chamber.
That's right. Tell her I was dropping dimes or quarters or whatever I could find.
I will do that. Congressman Amodei, thank you so much for your time. You're always so generous with us, and we appreciate your leadership in Washington, D.C., and we appreciate all you do for Nevada businesses.
Thanks a lot. We'll see you soon, Mary Beth.